city of Enugu glittered beneath the evening sky. From the top floor of the Okeke Towers, the lights of expensive hotels, busy roads, and luxurious homes stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a view most people could only dream of waking up to every morning. For Obinna Okeke, it meant nothing anymore. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of his office, the 32-year-old billionaire stared blankly at the city he had spent years conquering. His tailored black suit fit him perfectly, and the expensive watch on his wrist alone was worth more than most people's homes. His companies dominated construction, agriculture, transportation, and real estate across southeastern Nigeria. Newspapers constantly referred to him as Enugu's golden son. Every business conference wanted him as a keynote speaker. Politicians sought his friendship, while celebrities fought for invitations to his parties. He had everything money could buy, everything except peace. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." His personal assistant, Chinedu, stepped inside. "Sir, the board members are waiting." Obinna didn't even turn around. "Cancel the meeting." Chinedu blinked in surprise. "Sir, they've all arrived." "I said cancel it." "Yes, sir." The assistant quietly left the office, wondering what had happened to his usually disciplined boss. The truth was simple. Obinna no longer cared. He had spent 10 years building an empire only to discover that success attracted more masks than genuine faces. His phone buzzed on the desk. Another message. Another invitation. Another request for money. Another person pretending to care. Without looking, he silenced it. His eyes drifted toward a silver-framed photograph resting on his desk. He and his fiancée, Sandra. Both smiling. Both looking happy. The picture had been taken barely 3 months ago during their engagement celebration. Back then, he had believed he was the luckiest man alive. He picked up the photograph. His thumb slowly brushed across Sandra's smiling face. "I really believed you loved me," he whispered. The words tasted bitter. His mind unwillingly replayed everything that had happened 2 nights earlier. Obinna had returned home earlier than expected after a business trip to Abuja. He had wanted to surprise Sandra. Instead, he had been the one surprised. As he entered the sitting room of the luxurious mansion he had bought for them, he heard voices coming from the balcony. Sandra was laughing. Not the polite laugh she used around business associates. A real laugh. Happy. Carefree. He smiled, thinking she was speaking to one of her friends. Then he heard a man's voice. Curious, he quietly stepped closer. "I can't believe you're actually marrying him," the man said. Sandra laughed again. "You think I have a choice? So you don't love him?" There was a short silence. Then Sandra answered, "Love." She laughed even harder. "Please." Obinna froze. The smile disappeared from his face. "I've never loved Obinna," she continued. "I only stayed because of his money." His heart pounded painfully. "He practically worships me," Sandra continued proudly. "I'll marry him, wait a few years. Then I'll own half of everything he has." The man chuckled. "And what about us?" Sandra kissed him. Obinna heard it. Clear, loud, painful. "We'll always be us." His legs suddenly felt weak. The woman he had trusted with his heart, the woman he planned to spend forever with, had been using him from the very beginning. He stepped onto the balcony. Sandra's face immediately turned pale. "Obinna!" The other man quickly stood. "It's not what you think." Obinna looked from one face to the other. Then he laughed. Not because anything was funny, because he couldn't believe how foolish he had been. "I interrupted your conversation," he said calmly. Neither of them spoke. "So," he slowly removed the engagement ring from his finger. "You were planning my future while enjoying another man." Sandra rushed toward him. "Baby, listen." He stepped back. "Don't." Tears instantly appeared in her eyes. "It isn't like that." "It isn't." He looked directly into her eyes. "So tell me, which part did I misunderstand? The part where you said you've never loved me? Or the part where you planned to take half of my fortune?" Sandra opened her mouth, but no words came. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Obinna nodded slowly. I understand now. He gently placed the engagement ring on the glass table. The wedding is cancelled. He turned around. Obina! He didn't stop walking. Please! Still, he kept walking. By the time he reached the front door, Sandra was crying loudly behind him. He didn't look back. Some doors only needed to close once. Back in the present, Obina carefully returned the photograph to the desk. Then he picked it up again. Without hesitation, he dropped it into the office waste bin. The glass shattered. His phone rang once more. This time it was his mother. He answered. My son. Good evening, Mama. I heard about the engagement. He sighed. News travels fast. You'll be all right. I'm not sure. There was silence. Then his mother spoke softly. Do you know what your father always told you? Obina smiled faintly. Money builds houses, but character builds homes. Exactly. You've lost someone who never deserved you. It doesn't feel that way. I know. His mother's voice remained gentle. But don't allow one person's betrayal to harden your heart. I'll try. After hanging up, Obina leaned back in his chair. He remembered his father, a wealthy businessman who had risen from poverty. His father often disappeared from the city for days. As a child, Obina had asked why. His father smiled. Whenever wealth becomes too loud, I return to quiet places. At the time, Obina never understood. Now, he finally did. He suddenly stood, without calling anyone, without informing security, without telling his assistant. He walked out of the office. Employees greeted him respectfully as he passed. Good evening, sir. Have a nice evening, Chief. He barely heard them. Minutes later, he entered the underground parking garage. Rows of luxury vehicles lined the polished floor. Ferraris, Range Rovers, Mercedes-Benz, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces. He ignored them all. Instead, he chose his black Lexus SUV. Reliable, comfortable, anonymous. He tossed his phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. The security guards hurried toward him. Sir, should we prepare your escort? No. Should we inform your driver? I'm driving alone. But sir, I'm fine. The gates slowly opened. For the first time in years, Obina drove himself. No convoy, no flashing lights, no bodyguards, just him. The city traffic slowly faded behind him. Towering buildings became smaller. Busy highways became quieter roads. Then village roads. He had no destination. He simply drove. The cool evening breeze entered through the open window. For hours, he allowed the road to decide where he would go. His thoughts drifted endlessly. He remembered building his first company, sleeping inside unfinished buildings because he couldn't afford rent, borrowing money, working 18-hour days, missing birthdays, missing weddings, missing life itself. He had sacrificed everything: friends, family, love, peace, only to become surrounded by people who valued his bank account more than his heart. He laughed bitterly. What was the point? The road stretched endlessly before him. The stars slowly appeared overhead. His phone rang repeatedly. He ignored every call. Messages flooded in. His assistant, board members, his mother, business partners, Sandra, especially Sandra. He switched the phone off. Silence. Beautiful silence. The SUV continued rolling through unfamiliar roads. Villages came and went. Palm trees lined both sides of the road. Children chased one another near small houses. Women returned from markets balancing baskets on their heads. Old men sat beneath giant trees telling stories. Obina watched them through the windshield. They looked happy, not rich, just happy, something he had forgotten how to be. Hours passed. His thoughts became heavier than the night itself. He never once glanced at the dashboard, never noticed the fuel gauge sinking lower, never saw the warning light blinking. He was too lost inside his own mind. The engine suddenly coughed. Obina frowned. The vehicle jerked, then slowed. No! The SUV rolled a few more meters before stopping completely in the middle of an isolated road. Silence. He tried starting it again. Nothing. Only then did he look down. The fuel gauge rested far below empty. He closed his eyes. For the first time that day, he actually smiled. A tired smile. A billionaire. Stranded because he forgot to buy fuel. He leaned back against the driver's seat and laughed quietly at the irony of it all. Outside, darkness settled over the lonely countryside. There were no streetlights, no houses in sight, no passing vehicles, only the endless chirping of crickets and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Opening the boot, Obina found an empty fuel gallon left there from months earlier. He picked it up and looked down the deserted road stretching into the darkness. He had no idea where he was, no idea how far the next village might be. But staying beside an empty vehicle all night wasn't an option. Taking one last glance at the luxury SUV that had carried him this far, Obina locked the doors, slung the empty gallon over his shoulder, and began walking into the unknown. He had no way of knowing that every step away from his luxurious life was leading him toward the greatest adventure, and the greatest love, he would ever know. The night grew darker with every step Obina took. The only sounds that accompanied him were the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves in the cool breeze, and his own heavy breathing. The empty fuel gallon hanging from his hand seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. He had walked for nearly an hour, yet there was no sign of a filling station. No passing vehicles, no electricity, no houses, nothing but an endless road disappearing into darkness. His expensive leather shoes, designed for boardrooms rather than rough village roads, were beginning to tear apart. Small stones bruised the soles of his feet, and dust covered the bottom of his trousers. He stopped walking for a moment and looked up at the stars. It had been years since he had truly looked at the night sky. In the city, the bright lights always drowned out the stars. Out here, they filled the heavens like thousands of tiny diamonds. Despite the beauty above him, exhaustion was beginning to win. "I should have stayed with the car," he muttered. His stomach growled loudly. The last thing he had eaten was breakfast. His throat felt dry. His body, already drained from the emotional pain of the past few days, was now giving in to physical exhaustion. Still, he continued walking. "If I can find just one house," he whispered. Minutes turned into another hour. His legs became heavier. His vision blurred. The fuel gallon slipped from his fingers several times before he managed to pick it up again. His breathing became ragged. Then, in the distance, he noticed what looked like a faint lantern light. Hope surged through him. He forced his aching legs to move faster. But the light seemed much farther away than he had imagined. His steps became slower. His knees trembled. He took another step, then another. Suddenly, everything around him spun. His head became light. His body refused to obey him. The last thing he saw before collapsing was the lantern light growing larger. Then darkness swallowed everything. The crowing of a rooster pulled him back to consciousness. Obina slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he noticed was the roof. It wasn't made of concrete. It was woven from bamboo and dried palm leaves. Sunlight streamed through tiny gaps in the roof, painting golden lines across the room. He frowned. "This isn't my house." He slowly sat up. His body ached from head to toe. The room was small but clean. The walls were made of smooth mud. Clay pots lined one corner. Bundles of dried herbs hung from wooden beams. A simple wooden table stood beside the bed. He looked down. He wasn't lying on a luxurious mattress. Instead, he rested on a neatly spread raffia mat covered with a clean cotton sheet. The rich aroma of boiling yam and vegetable soup drifted into the room. His stomach immediately growled. Before he could stand, the wooden door creaked open. An elderly man entered carrying a calabash filled with water. He was lean, dark-skinned, and dressed in a faded wrapper tied around his waist. His gray beard framed a face that radiated kindness. The old man smiled warmly. "So, our sleeping traveler is finally awake." Obina stared at him. "You found me?" The old man nodded. "My daughters and I were returning from the stream when we saw you lying beside the road. You had fainted. We thought you were dead." Obina tried to stand immediately. Pain shot through his legs. The old man gently pushed him back down. Easy. Your body needs rest. Obinna lowered his head. Thank you. The old man handed him the calabash. Drink. Obinna didn't realize how thirsty he was until the cool water touched his lips. He emptied it within seconds. The old man chuckled. I'll take that as proof you're feeling better. My name is Naji. Most people simply call me Papa Naji. Obinna smiled faintly. He hesitated. Should he reveal who he really was? If these people discovered he was one of the richest men in Enugu, everything would change. Their kindness might become expectation. Their hospitality might become opportunity. He remembered Sandra. He remembered the fake smiles, the lies, the greed. No, not this time. My name is Obi. Papa Naji nodded without suspicion. And where are you from, Obi? I'm a traveler. I got lost. It wasn't entirely a lie. He truly was lost. Not just on the road. In life. Papa Naji studied him for a few moments. You don't look like someone used to village roads. Obinna laughed awkwardly. I suppose I don't. Before the conversation could continue, another voice came from outside. Papa, the food is ready. A young woman stepped into the room carrying a wooden tray. Obinna looked up. She couldn't have been older than 24. She wore a simple blue wrapper and matching blouse. Unlike the women he met in the city who covered themselves with expensive makeup and designer jewelry, her beauty was effortless. Her dark skin glowed naturally beneath the morning sunlight. Her long braided hair rested neatly over one shoulder. Her eyes were gentle. She smiled politely. Good morning. Obinna returned the greeting. Good morning. Papa Naji took the tray. This is my eldest daughter, Adiz. Adiz bowed respectfully. We're glad you're awake. She placed the tray on the table. There is boiled yam, vegetable soup, and fresh palm wine. I hope you'll eat. Obinna hadn't realized how hungry he truly was until he saw the steaming food. It smells wonderful. She smiled shyly. I cooked it. Before he could thank her, another young woman burst into the room. Unlike Adiz's calm nature, this one seemed full of energy. She carried a basket of vegetables on her head. So he's awake. She dropped the basket beside the door and folded her arms. I honestly thought we'd be digging a grave today. Papa Naji frowned. Chioma. She laughed. I'm joking, Papa. She looked at Obinna from head to toe. You certainly don't look like a farmer. Obinna smiled. I'm not. I knew it. She pointed toward his hands. Look at those palms. No calluses. Soft like a baby's. Adiz gently nudged her sister. Stop embarrassing our guest. I'm only telling the truth. Everyone laughed. For the first time in days, Obinna laughed too. Felt strange. But good. Very good. After breakfast, Papa Naji showed Obinna around the compound. The hut sat on several acres of farmland. Rows of cassava, maize, vegetables, and yams stretched across the rich red soil. Nearby stood a chicken coop. Goats wandered freely around the compound. Several mango trees offered welcome shade from the afternoon sun. Children laughed while chasing one another along the dusty footpaths. Women carried baskets from the stream. Men sharpened hoes beneath giant trees. Everything moved slowly, peacefully. Nobody seemed to be in a hurry. Obinna watched quietly. This place is beautiful. Papa Naji smiled. We may not have money, but we sleep peacefully. Those words lingered in Obinna's mind. Money, peace. He had one, not the other. As they walked through the farm, Papa Naji suddenly asked, So, when do you plan to continue your journey? Obinna became silent. The truth was, he didn't know. He wasn't ready to return. He wasn't ready to face board meetings, reporters, business deals, or Sandra. I don't know. Papa Naji nodded thoughtfully. If you need somewhere to stay for a few days, you are welcome here. Obinna looked at him in surprise. You hardly know me. The old man smiled. My father always said, when a stranger arrives hungry, feed him before asking questions. Obinna felt something tighten in his chest. Such kindness. from someone who had almost nothing, yet expected nothing in return. He swallowed hard. Thank you. You don't know how much that means to me. Papa Naji simply smiled. That evening, the family gathered outside beneath a large mango tree for dinner. There was no television, no phones, no expensive dining table, only 4 wooden stools surrounding a small fire. As they ate, everyone shared stories from their day. Chioma complained about a stubborn goat that kept eating her vegetables. Papa Naji laughed so hard he nearly spilled his soup. Adiz quietly listened, smiling at her family's jokes. Obinna mostly watched, listened, enjoyed. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had dinner without someone discussing contracts or profit margins. Here, people laughed over goats, and somehow felt richer. After dinner, Adiz handed him a small lantern. You'll need this. The nights become very dark. Thank you. She hesitated before speaking again. You looked very sad when we found you. Obinna looked away. I've had a difficult week. You don't have to tell me. She smiled gently. But sometimes, talking helps. For a moment, Obinna almost told her everything. The betrayal, the loneliness, the broken engagement. Instead, he simply nodded. Maybe one day. She smiled again before returning inside. Obinna watched her disappear into the hut. There was something different about her. She didn't ask about his money, his career, his possessions. She only cared whether he was all right. It was refreshing. The following morning, Obinna woke before sunrise. He stepped outside to find Papa Naji already preparing farming tools. The old man looked up. Good. You're awake. I was just heading to the fields. Obinna hesitated, then asked, Can I come? Papa Naji laughed. I'm serious. You've never farmed before. I can learn. The old man studied him for a long moment. Finally, he smiled. Very well. But don't blame me when your body begins to ache. Obinna grinned. I'll survive. Papa Naji handed him a hoe. The billionaire looked down at the farming tool. Yesterday, his hands had signed contracts worth billions of naira. Today, those same hands would dig into the earth. As they walked toward the fields beneath the rising sun, neither man realized that this simple decision would change Obinna's life forever. For the first time in many years, the billionaire wasn't walking toward another business deal. He was walking toward the life he never knew he needed. The first rays of dawn spread across the village like golden silk. The roosters crowed from every direction, announcing the arrival of a new day. A cool morning breeze drifted through the trees, carrying with it the earthy scent of damp soil and fresh crops. Birds sang cheerfully as villagers slowly emerged from their huts to begin another day's work. Obinna rubbed the sleep from his eyes as he stepped outside the small hut. The world felt different here. Back in Enugu, he used to wake up to the sound of car horns, ringing phones, and business notifications flooding his mobile device. Every morning began with meetings, deadlines, and pressure. Here, the loudest sound was nature itself. Papa Naji was already outside sharpening his hoe. You slept well? The old farmer asked without looking up. I did. You'll need all that rest. Obinna smiled. I've survived tougher things. Papa Naji chuckled. We shall see. Moments later, Adiz emerged carrying a basket balanced gracefully on her head. She wore a simple green wrapper with a white blouse. Her face glowed naturally in the soft morning light. She smiled politely. I prepared breakfast. Obinna looked at the tray she placed on a wooden stool. Boiled yam, palm oil sauce, roasted fish, fresh garden eggs. Simple food. Yet somehow it looked more inviting than the expensive continental breakfasts served in five-star hotels. As they ate together, Chioma watched Obinna with amusement. You'll run away before noon. Obinna laughed. What makes you think so? You've never worked on a farm before. I'll learn. She shook her head. City people always say that. Papa Naji stood. Enough talking. The crops won't harvest themselves. Obinna picked up the hoe lying beside him. The wooden handle felt unfamiliar in his hands. The billionaire who usually signed billion naira contracts was now preparing to dig into the earth. As they walked toward the fields, the rising sun painted the sky shades of orange and pink. The farmland stretched endlessly before them. Cassava plants stood in neat rows. Tall maize swayed gently in the breeze. Pepper plants covered another section. Yam mounds lined the far end of the field. Several farmers were already hard at work. One elderly man noticed Obinna approaching. He laughed loudly. "Papa Naji, have you employed a new worker?" The other farmers looked up. Their eyes settled on Obinna. One of them whistled. "This one looks too handsome for farm work." Laughter erupted across the field. Obinna simply smiled. "I'll try my best." The men laughed even harder. "We'll see if those soft hands survive today." Papa Naji handed Obinna a hoe. "Start by clearing the weeds between these cassava rows." Obinna nodded confidently. He raised the hoe, swung it, missed completely. The blade struck a stone with a loud clang. Several farmers burst into laughter. Chioma covered her mouth. "I warned you." Even Papa Naji struggled to hide his smile. "Not like that." He demonstrated patiently. "You must let the weight of the hoe do the work." Obinna watched carefully, then tried again. This time the blade entered the soil. "Better," Papa Naji said. For the next several hours, Obinna worked without complaint. The sun climbed higher. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His palms slowly developed painful blisters. His back began to ache. Every muscle in his body protested. Still, he refused to quit. Whenever he paused to catch his breath, the other farmers teased him. "City boy, need a chair. Should we call your secretary?" Everyone laughed. Even Obinna found himself laughing. The jokes weren't cruel. They were simply part of village life. By midday, his shirt was covered in dust and sweat. His hands trembled from exhaustion. "I think my arms have stopped belonging to me," he joked. The farmers roared with laughter. One of them, a cheerful young man named Emeka, slapped him gently on the shoulder. "That's only the first half of the day." Obinna stared at him. "There is more." Everyone laughed again. "You've not even harvested yam yet." Obinna groaned dramatically. "I may not survive." Just then, someone called from the footpath. "Papa!" Everyone turned. Adiz was approaching with a large basket balanced on her head. She carried wrapped portions of food and clay pots filled with cool water. Several of the farmers exchanged knowing smiles. "Food has arrived." She carefully placed the basket beneath a large mango tree. "I brought lunch." One by one, the workers gathered around. Adiz handed each man his portion. When she reached Obinna, she hesitated. "I made yours separately." She handed him a larger leaf wrap. Inside was pounded yam with rich egusi soup and tender pieces of smoked fish. Obinna looked surprised. "This is more than everyone else's." Adiz smiled shyly. "You worked very hard today. You probably need extra strength." Before Obinna could reply, Emeka burst into laughter. "Papa Naji, I've seen enough." Another farmer joined in. "Our Obi has someone taking special care of him." The others immediately understood. Laughter echoed through the field. Obinna looked confused. "What?" Emeka pointed at Adiz. "She has never packed special food for any worker." Another farmer nodded. "Never. Not once." The third man grinned. "She even added extra fish." Everyone laughed louder. Adiz's cheeks turned bright red. "Stop saying nonsense." She quickly looked away. "I'm only being kind." Emeka folded his arms dramatically. "Kind? When I almost fainted last month, you gave me ordinary yam." More laughter. "You've given this man pounded yam." Another worker pretended to cry. "So this is how we're treated after years of loyalty." Even Papa Naji chuckled. Adiz frowned. "All of you should just eat." She hurried away before anyone could tease her further. The moment she disappeared down the path, the jokes continued. Emeka nudged Obinna. "My friend, I think our Adiz likes you." Obinna shook his head. "No, she's simply kind." Emeka laughed. "That girl hardly speaks to strangers. Now she's cooking special meals, bringing extra fish." and smiling every time you look at her. Another farmer grinned. She's even blushing. Obinna laughed awkwardly. I think you're imagining things. The men exchanged amused looks. Keep telling yourself that. The days slowly turned into weeks. Obinna became stronger. The blisters on his hands hardened into calluses. His muscles adjusted to the demanding work. Soon, he could clear an entire section of farmland without stopping to rest. The farmers who once laughed at him now respected his determination. You learn quickly, Papanaji remarked one evening. Obinna smiled. I had a good teacher. The old farmer laughed. No, you simply refused to give up. Every evening, the villagers gathered beneath the giant Udala tree in the village square. Children played games. Women braided one another's hair. Old men told stories filled with wisdom and laughter. Obinna often sat quietly listening. He found himself smiling more, sleeping better, thinking less about Sandra. The pain inside him was slowly healing. One afternoon, after everyone had finished harvesting maize, dark clouds suddenly gathered overhead. Rain began pouring heavily. The workers rushed toward a nearby shed. Within minutes, everyone was soaked. Obinna laughed as water dripped from his face. I've never worked in the rain before. Emeka grinned. Then today is another first. The rain continued for nearly an hour. As everyone waited, they shared stories. One farmer asked Obinna, So, do you have a wife waiting wherever you came from? The question caught him off guard. No, you don't. I almost did. The laughter stopped. What happened? Obinna stared at the rain falling outside. She chose someone else. Silence settled over the shed. Finally, Papanaji spoke quietly. Then she wasn't meant for you. Obinna nodded. I suppose not. He noticed Adiz watching him from the corner of the shed. There was sadness in her eyes. Not pity, compassion. It was different, much different. One evening, after supper, Obinna sat outside watching the stars. He had grown to love the peaceful nights. Adiz walked over carrying 2 calabashes filled with fresh palm wine. May I sit? Of course. She handed him one of the calabashes. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, she asked softly, Do you miss your home? Obinna looked toward the stars. I don't know. You don't know? I miss the buildings. The business. My office. But, he smiled faintly, I don't miss the people. Adiz looked at him curiously. Were they unkind? He hesitated. Not exactly. They just... He searched for the right words. They only saw what I could give them. She frowned slightly. I don't understand. He smiled sadly. I hope you never do. The breeze gently stirred the mango leaves above them. Adiz looked toward the moon. You know. I've noticed something. What? You smile more now. Obinna laughed quietly. Do I? Yes. When you first arrived, your eyes looked empty. She hesitated. Now they don't. Her words lingered in his heart long after she returned inside. For the first time since Sandra's betrayal, someone had noticed not his appearance, not his money, not his status, but the condition of his heart. Several days later, the village became unusually busy. Women decorated compounds with colorful fabrics. Children practiced traditional dances. Men repaired drums and carved wooden decorations. Obinna noticed everyone seemed excited. He stopped Emeka, who was carrying bundles of palm leaves. What's happening? Emeka stared at him in disbelief. You forgot. Forgot what? The new Yam Festival. The biggest celebration of the year. He pointed toward the village square. There will be music, dancing, food, and the grand wrestling competition. Obinna smiled. It sounds exciting. Emeka laughed mischievously. Oh, it's more than exciting. He placed a hand on Obinna's shoulder. And this year, you're entering the wrestling competition. Obinna almost dropped the basket he was carrying. What? I've never wrestled before. The surrounding farmers burst into laughter. You said the same thing about farming. Look at you now. Papanaji smiled knowingly. The village champion is getting old. Perhaps it's time for fresh blood. Obinna shook his head. I think you've all overestimated me. Emeka laughed loudly. We'll find out during the festival. As everyone continued preparing for the biggest celebration of the year, Obinna looked around at the smiling faces surrounding him. For the first time in years, he no longer felt like a billionaire hiding from the world. He felt like he belonged somewhere. Little did he know that the coming festival would not only change his place in the village, but would also awaken feelings, jealousy, and danger that would alter the course of his life forever. The morning of the New Yam festival arrived with an excitement that spread through the entire village. Before the sun had fully risen, women were already sweeping their compounds and decorating entrances with fresh palm fronds and colorful woven fabrics. The smell of roasted yam, spicy soups, and grilled meat drifted through the air as families prepared meals for the celebration. Children ran through the dusty paths wearing bright traditional clothes, laughing and singing festival songs they had practiced for weeks. Drums echoed from the village square long before the official celebration began. For Obinna, it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Back in Enugu, he had attended lavish galas, business award ceremonies, and expensive charity dinners where people wore designer suits and smiled for cameras. Those events had been elegant, but they had also felt stiff and artificial. This festival felt alive. Every smile was genuine. Every laugh came from the heart. As he stepped out of Papa Naji's compound, Chioma whistled loudly. Look at our city man. Obinna looked down at himself and laughed. Papa Naji had insisted he wear traditional wrestling attire instead of his usual clothes. Around his waist was a simple wrapper tied securely, while his upper body remained bare except for white chalk markings that one of the village elders had drawn across his chest and shoulders. I still think this is a bad idea, Obinna said. Chioma burst into laughter. You've been saying that for 3 days. And you're still going. Adiz stepped outside carrying a small calabash filled with palm oil. She smiled softly. Papa said this will keep your skin from drying under the sun. She gently rubbed a little palm oil onto his shoulders. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it didn't go unnoticed. Chioma folded her arms dramatically. I see. Adiz immediately withdrew her hand. I was only helping. Chioma grinned mischievously. Of course you were. Obinna laughed awkwardly. Papa Naji came out carrying his walking stick. Enough teasing. We're already late. Together, they joined the stream of villagers heading toward the village square. The square had been transformed overnight. Tall bamboo poles decorated with colorful cloth surrounded the open arena. Large clay pots filled with fresh flowers lined the entrance. Market women displayed baskets overflowing with fruits, vegetables, and handmade crafts. Drummers sat beneath a giant Irako tree, beating powerful rhythms that echoed across the valley. Young dancers moved gracefully to the music while elders watched proudly from carved wooden seats. The atmosphere was electric. Obinna couldn't stop smiling. So many people, he whispered. Emeka suddenly appeared behind him. Wait until the wrestling starts. You haven't seen anything yet. As they walked deeper into the square, villagers greeted Obinna warmly. Obi, our new farmer, don't embarrass us today. We're counting on you. He laughed nervously. I'll try. You'll do more than try, Emeka declared confidently. You'll win. Obinna shook his head. I've never wrestled before. You've carried bags of fertilizer. You've harvested yam. You've worked from sunrise to sunset. You've become stronger than you realize. Those words stayed with Obinna. Maybe Emeka was right. Months of farming had changed him. His shoulders were broader. His arms were stronger. His body no longer resembled the businessman who had arrived in expensive shoes. Still, wrestling was different. He wasn't sure he was ready. A loud blast from an elephant tusk horn silenced the crowd. Everyone turned toward the royal pavilion. The king entered, dressed in magnificent traditional robes embroidered with gold thread. A crown decorated with coral beads rested proudly upon his head. The crowd immediately bowed. Long live the king! Long live our father! Behind the king walked members of the royal family. Among them was Princess Nkem. Obinna noticed her immediately. She was stunning. She wore a richly embroidered wrapper woven with gold patterns and layers of coral beads around her neck and wrists. Her confidence made her stand out even more than her beauty. As she walked past the crowd, many young men stared in admiration. She barely acknowledged them. Instead, her eyes briefly settled on Obinna. He noticed, then looked away. He thought nothing of it. Princess Nkem, however, did not. She quietly asked one of her attendants, "Who is that man?" The attendant followed her gaze. "The stranger who has been living with Papa Naji. The farmers call him Obi." She continued watching him as she took her seat beside her father. There is something different about him. After the traditional prayers and blessings over the new yam harvest, the village chief announced the wrestling competition. This year's champion will receive the warrior's staff, 3 goats, and the honor of leading next year's opening procession. Cheers erupted from every direction. Young men rushed into the wrestling arena one after another. The first few matches were entertaining. Contestants pushed, lifted, and threw one another into the soft sand while the crowd roared with excitement. Emeka nudged Obinna. "You're 5th. Obinna took a deep breath. "I still think I've made a mistake." Emeka laughed. Too late now. When Obinna's name was announced, the crowd erupted into curious murmurs. "The stranger. Can he wrestle? We're about to find out." He stepped into the arena. Across from him stood his first opponent, a muscular blacksmith named Okoro. The man looked twice Obinna's size. Koro smiled confidently. "You should return to farming." Obinna smiled politely. "I'll consider it." The referee signaled for the match to begin. Koro charged immediately. Obinna reacted instinctively. Months of lifting heavy farm tools and carrying harvested crops had strengthened his balance. He sidestepped at the last second. Koro stumbled. The crowd gasped. Obinna seized the opportunity. Wrapping both arms around Okoro's waist, he shifted his weight exactly as Papa Naji had taught him while lifting sacks of cassava. With one powerful movement, he threw the giant man onto the sand. The referee immediately raised Obinna's hand. "The winner!" For a moment, the entire square became silent. Then, thunderous cheers exploded. "He did it! The stranger won!" Even Obinna looked surprised. "I actually won." Emeka jumped over the arena fence and hugged him. "I told you." Papa Naji laughed proudly. "I knew hard work would prepare you." Adiz smiled so brightly that she hardly noticed everyone watching her. The next opponent proved much more difficult. This wrestler was younger, faster, and far more experienced. For several minutes, neither man gained an advantage. They circled each other carefully. The crowd shouted encouragement. Dust rose beneath their feet. Finally, Obinna noticed his opponent favoring his left leg. He remembered something his late father had once told him during childhood. Never fight strength with strength. Use observation. At the right moment, Obinna feinted to one side. His opponent shifted his weight. Obinna quickly hooked the weaker leg and pushed. The wrestler crashed onto the sand. Another victory. The crowd erupted again. By now, everyone was chanting his name. "Obi! Obi! Obi!" Princess Nkem leaned forward in her chair. Her eyes never left him. The mysterious stranger fascinated her more with every passing minute. The final match came shortly before sunset. Standing opposite Obinna was the reigning village champion, Chukwuemeka. The older man had remained undefeated for 6 consecutive years. He smiled respectfully. "You've done well, but this is where your journey ends." Obinna smiled. "We'll soon find out." The match began. Unlike the previous opponents, Chukwuemeka was patient. Neither man rushed. They circled slowly, testing, waiting. The crowd watched in complete silence. Suddenly, Chukwuemeka lunged forward. The force nearly knocked Obinna off his feet. For several tense moments, both men struggled. Their muscles strained. Their feet dug deep into the sand. The villagers shouted wildly, "Push! Hold him! Don't give up!" Obinna's arms burned. His breathing became heavy. He could feel himself losing strength. Then, he heard a familiar voice. Obi! He glanced toward the crowd. Adiz stood with both hands clasped together. You can do it! Their eyes met for only a second. But that second changed everything. A renewed determination surged through him. With one final burst of strength, Obinna shifted his hips, locked both arms beneath Chukwuemeka's shoulders, and lifted him completely off the ground. The crowd gasped, then erupted into deafening cheers as Chukwuemeka landed flat on his back. The referee raised Obinna's hand high into the air. We have a new champion! The entire village exploded with excitement. Drums thundered. Women ululated joyfully. Children danced around the arena. Emeka lifted Obinna onto his shoulders. Our champion! Our champion! Papa Naji wiped tears from his eyes. I've never been prouder. Adiz smiled through happy tears. She had never imagined the quiet stranger they had rescued by the roadside would become the hero of the village. As evening fell, the celebration continued with music and dancing around large bonfires. Obinna barely had time to eat. Young men congratulated him. Elders praised his humility. Even visitors from neighboring villages came to shake his hand. Then something unexpected happened. Several young women approached him. One offered him roasted meat. Another brought him fresh palm wine. A third boldly asked him to dance. You wrestle like a real warrior. Are you married? You should visit my father's compound tomorrow. The women giggled among themselves. Obinna politely declined each invitation. I appreciate your kindness, but I'd rather stay here with my friends. From across the bonfire, Adiz watched every conversation. She tried to focus on helping serve food, but her eyes kept drifting toward him. Each time another woman laughed with him, an unfamiliar feeling twisted inside her chest. Chioma quietly walked over. You don't like this. Adiz looked away. I don't know what you're talking about. You've been staring at him for the last 20 minutes. I have not. Chioma laughed softly. Big sister, I think you've fallen in love. Adiz's face immediately turned red. Before she could answer, Emeka walked over carrying 2 calabashes of palm wine. He grinned mischievously at Obinna. So, our champion, you've become the most wanted man in the village. The other farm workers burst into laughter. I've never seen so many women chasing one man. Another added, but there's only one woman who truly wishes all the others would disappear. Everyone looked toward Adiz. She quickly pretended to be busy arranging plates. Obinna followed their gaze. A small smile appeared on his face. Could it really be true? Before he could think further, a royal messenger approached. He bowed respectfully. Champion, the princess wishes to speak with you. The laughter around the fire immediately faded. Every eye turned toward Obinna. Even Adiz froze. The royal messenger gestured toward the beautifully lit palace gardens beyond the festival grounds. Obinna exchanged uncertain glances with Papa Naji. The old farmer nodded slowly. It is not wise to refuse a royal invitation. Taking a deep breath, Obinna followed the messenger toward the palace, completely unaware that the meeting awaiting him would become the beginning of the greatest trial of his life. The royal messenger led Obinna away from the lively festival grounds and toward the palace. With every step, the sounds of laughter, drumming, and celebration grew fainter until they became nothing more than a distant echo carried by the evening breeze. The palace stood proudly on a gentle hill overlooking the village. It was larger than any building in the community, surrounded by carved wooden fences decorated with traditional symbols of authority. Torches burned brightly along the pathways, their flames dancing in the cool night air. Obinna looked around quietly. Even though the palace was beautiful, it lacked the luxury he had grown accustomed to in the city. There were no marble floors or glittering chandeliers, yet it possessed something equally impressive: history. The messenger stopped at a beautifully decorated garden behind the palace. The princess will be with you shortly. Obinna nodded politely. Thank you. The messenger bowed and quietly disappeared. Obinna stood alone beneath a large moonlit udala tree. The fragrance of blooming flowers filled the garden, while the soft sound of flowing water came from a nearby stone fountain. He wondered why the princess wanted to see him. Perhaps she wished to congratulate him on winning the wrestling competition. Nothing more. A few moments later, soft footsteps approached. Princess Nkem emerged from a stone pathway lined with lanterns. She had changed from the elaborate royal attire she wore during the festival into a flowing ivory wrapper embroidered with golden thread. Coral beads rested elegantly around her neck, and her long hair was neatly braided with tiny gold ornaments. She smiled warmly. "Congratulations, champion." Obina bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Highness. I watched every one of your matches. I was impressed. I appreciate your kindness." She studied him carefully. "You don't behave like most men." Obina looked confused. "In what way?" "They usually spend the entire conversation trying to impress me. You haven't." He smiled faintly. "I don't think I could." She laughed softly. "I like your honesty." For several moments, they simply walked through the palace gardens. The princess asked about farming. Obina answered carefully, avoiding revealing too much about his real life. "You've only been in the village for a short time," she observed. "Yet everyone seems to respect you. They've been very kind to me, especially Papa Naji's family." At the mention of Adiz, Princess Nkem noticed a subtle softness in his voice. She said nothing. Instead, she changed the subject. "Tell me, Obi, have you ever thought about staying here permanently?" The question surprised him. "I haven't. You would make a fine leader. I am only a traveler." She stopped walking and turned to face him. The playful smile disappeared from her face. "I don't want you to leave." Obina frowned slightly. "Your Highness." She took a slow step closer. "I have met princes, sons of wealthy chiefs, powerful hunters, great warriors. They all wanted to marry me because I am a princess." She looked directly into his eyes. "You are different. You looked at me as though I were simply another woman. I've never experienced that before." Obina suddenly understood where the conversation was heading. His expression became uneasy. The princess reached for his hand. "I want you. I want you to stay. You can live in this palace. My father listens to me. I can convince him. You would never have to work in the fields again." The garden became silent. Obina slowly withdrew his hand. He took a respectful step backward. "Your Highness, I am deeply honored, but I cannot accept." Her smile faded. "Cannot. I am not looking for love. I've been hurt before. My heart isn't ready." Princess Nkem continued staring at him. "Is this because of Adiz?" He hesitated. "No." "Then why?" He looked toward the moon. "Because I promised myself I would never allow my heart to make decisions until it had healed. I came here to escape pain, not to begin another relationship." She moved closer again. "I can help you heal." He smiled sadly. "Some wounds must heal on their own." The princess's expression hardened. "Do you know how many men have begged for my attention?" "I can imagine." "And yet," she shook her head in disbelief. "You are rejecting me? I mean no disrespect. I simply cannot give you what you deserve." For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Obina bowed once more. "If you'll excuse me, Your Highness." He turned and walked away. Princess Nkem remained frozen beneath the Udala tree. She watched him disappear into the darkness. Then her gentle expression vanished completely. Her eyes filled with wounded pride. "No man has ever rejected me." Her voice trembled, not with sadness, but with anger. "If you will not choose me." Her fingers slowly curled into fists. "Then no woman will." Meanwhile, back at the festival, Adiz sat quietly near one of the bonfires. Although music continued and villagers danced joyfully, she found herself unable to enjoy the celebration. Her eyes repeatedly drifted toward the palace. Chioma noticed immediately. "You're worried." Adiz forced a smile. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You've looked toward the palace at least 20 times. Adiz sighed. "I don't know why the princess called him." Chioma laughed softly. "Perhaps she simply wanted to congratulate him. Perhaps. But But what? I have a strange feeling. Chioma gently squeezed her sister's hand. If Obi is the man we think he is, he'll be all right. Adiz nodded. She hoped her sister was right. Obinna returned to the festival nearly 30 minutes later. Emeka immediately rushed toward him. Our champion has returned. What did the princess want? The other farm workers gathered around eagerly. Tell us. Obinna smiled. She congratulated me. That's all. Mostly. The men exchanged suspicious glances. You were gone for half an hour. You must be hiding something. Obinna laughed. I assure you, nothing important happened. Only Adiz noticed the sadness hidden behind his smile. As everyone returned to dancing, she quietly approached him. Are you all right? He looked at her. For a brief moment, he simply admired the kindness in her eyes. I'm all right. You don't look all right. He chuckled softly. You notice everything. She smiled. My father says people reveal more with their faces than with their words. Obinna nodded. He's a wise man. She hesitated. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Those simple words touched him more deeply than she realized. Thank you. Before either of them could say anything else, Emeka called loudly, Champion, come and dance. The villagers surrounded Obinna, pulling him toward the dancers. Even he couldn't refuse. Soon, laughter replaced serious conversation as he awkwardly attempted the traditional dance steps. His clumsy movements sent the crowd into fits of laughter. Even Adiz laughed until tears formed in her eyes. For the first time in many months, Obinna laughed without pretending. Elsewhere inside the palace, Princess Nkem sat silently in her private chambers. Her closest friend and personal attendant, Ifunanya, entered carrying a tray of fruit. You haven't touched your dinner. I'm not hungry. If this is about the stranger, his name is Obi. If this is about Obi, the princess interrupted sharply. He rejected me. Ifunanya nearly dropped the tray. He what? He refused me. Why? He says his heart is wounded. Ifunanya frowned thoughtfully. Perhaps he truly isn't ready. Princess Nkem stood abruptly. No. No man rejects a princess. He must be taught a lesson. Her friend looked uneasy. What are you planning? The princess walked toward the palace window overlooking the village. I watched him today. The villagers adore him. Papa Naji treats him like family. The farmers respect him. She smiled coldly. Let's see how much they love him. When they believe he's a thief. Ifunanya's eyes widened. Your Highness. Don't. This could become dangerous. Princess Nkem turned slowly. Do you know where father keeps the royal staff? Ifunanya's heart skipped. The staff of authority? The sacred one? Princess Nkem nodded. Yes. The entire kingdom would panic if it disappeared. If it were found among the belongings of a stranger. She allowed the sentence to hang in the air. Ifunanya stared at her in horror. You can't mean that. I do. But he'll be imprisoned. Princess Nkem's voice became icy. Exactly. If I cannot have him, then no one will. Long after the festival ended, the village finally grew quiet. Families returned to their homes. The bonfires slowly burned down to glowing embers. Inside Papa Naji's hut, everyone spoke excitedly about the day's events. Our champion, Chioma teased. I still can't believe you defeated Chukwamika. Papa Naji smiled proudly. You've honored this family. Obinna laughed. I only got lucky. Lucky, Chioma exclaimed. You threw the strongest man in the village onto his back. That wasn't luck. Adiz quietly placed food before him. You should eat. You hardly touched anything during the celebration. Thank you. Their hands accidentally brushed as she handed him the bowl. For a brief second, both froze. Neither spoke. Neither pulled away immediately. Then they both looked elsewhere, pretending nothing had happened. Chioma noticed. She hid a smile. After dinner, everyone prepared for bed. Obinna stepped outside one last time before sleeping. The village was peaceful beneath the moonlight. He He closed his eyes. For the first time since leaving Enugu, he felt genuinely at peace. He had no idea that somewhere inside the palace, someone was plotting to destroy everything he had begun to build. Hidden beneath the cover of darkness, Princess Nkem quietly slipped through the palace corridors toward the sacred chamber where the king kept the royal staff, the ancient symbol of his authority. Her footsteps were silent. Her heart was filled not with love, but with revenge. By sunrise, the entire kingdom would awaken to a crime that would turn their beloved wrestling champion into the most hated man in the village. The first rays of the morning sun had barely touched the rooftops of the village when a loud cry shattered the peaceful silence. "The royal staff is gone." Another voice echoed through the palace courtyard. "The staff of authority has been stolen." Within moments, panic swept through the entire palace. Palace guards ran from one corridor to another, servants whispered in fear, and the sound of the emergency gong rang across the kingdom. Gong! 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 Villagers stopped whatever they were doing and looked toward the palace in confusion. Women abandoned their cooking fires. Farmers dropped their hoes. Children stopped playing. Everyone knew the importance of the royal staff. It was more than a carved piece of wood. It represented the authority of the king and the unity of the kingdom. According to village tradition, losing it was considered a terrible omen. Inside the palace, the king paced angrily across the throne room. His face was filled with worry. How could this happen? He looked at the captain of the royal guards. "You were responsible for guarding the sacred chamber." The captain bowed his head. "My king, I do not know how the thief entered. No doors were broken. No guards reported anything unusual." The king slammed his staff against the floor. "Then search. Search every inch of this kingdom. I want the staff found before sunset." The captain bowed. "Yes, your majesty." Standing quietly beside the throne was Princess Nkem. She lowered her eyes, pretending to share her father's concern. Inside, she smiled. Everything was unfolding exactly as she had planned. The previous night, after everyone had fallen asleep, she had quietly entered the sacred chamber using a spare key known only to members of the royal family. She had taken the staff without anyone seeing her. Before dawn, dressed in a dark wrapper, she had secretly slipped into Papa Naji's compound. She remembered how easy it had been. Obina's travel bag still rested beside the small bed where he slept. She had gently opened it, placed the royal staff beneath his folded clothes, then disappeared before the first rooster crowed. Now, she simply waited. Back at Papa Naji's compound, life continued as normal. Obina stretched his aching muscles outside the hut. Winning the wrestling competition had left his entire body sore. He smiled to himself. "I think Chukwamika almost broke my ribs." Chioma laughed as she swept the compound. "You should be grateful you still have ribs." Papa Naji emerged carrying 2 hoes. "The weeds won't wait for your muscles to recover." Obina grinned. "I'll survive." Adiz stepped outside carrying breakfast. She looked at Obina with concern. "You should rest today." "I'm fine. You wrestled 3 matches yesterday." "I've had worse." She smiled softly. "You always say that." Before anyone could continue the conversation, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted them. Several palace guards marched toward the compound, followed by dozens of curious villagers. The captain of the guards stood at the entrance. "By order of the king, every household will be searched." Papa Naji frowned. "What has happened?" "The royal staff has been stolen." The old farmer gasped. "What?" The villagers began murmuring among themselves. "Who would dare? This has never happened before." The captain spoke firmly. "No house will be exempt." Papa Naji stepped aside. "You may search." The guards spread throughout the compound. Some searched the kitchen. Others entered the storage hut. Several examined baskets of harvested crops. Obina remained calm. He had nothing to hide. One guard entered the small room where Obina slept. Moments later, a shout echoed through the compound. "Captain, I've found it!" The entire compound fell silent. The guard emerged holding the royal staff high above his head. The sacred carvings glowed beneath the morning sun. Everyone stared in disbelief. The captain slowly turned toward Obinna. "Whose room?" The guard pointed directly at him. "The stranger's." Every pair of eyes shifted toward Obinna. He frowned. "That's impossible." The captain approached. "Is this your travel bag?" "Yes." "And the staff was inside it." Obinna's heart pounded. "I've never seen that staff before." "You expect us to believe that?" One of the villagers shouted angrily. "He fooled all of us." Another pointed at him. "I knew no stranger could be trusted." The accusations came from every direction. "Thief! Criminal! We welcomed you into our homes. You repaid us by stealing from the king." Obinna looked around in disbelief. Only yesterday, these same people had celebrated his victory. Now they looked at him with hatred. He raised both hands. "I swear, I did not steal it." Nobody listened. The captain nodded toward his men. "Arrest him." Two guards stepped forward. They roughly grabbed Obinna's arms. He didn't resist. Instead, he looked toward Papanaji. "Please. You know I wouldn't do this." The old farmer stood frozen. His face reflected confusion more than anger. I don't know what to think." Those words hurt more than the handcuffs. Obinna turned toward Adiz. She stepped forward immediately. "No. He's innocent." Several villagers stared at her. "You don't know that." "I do." She looked directly at the captain. "He would never steal." The captain's expression remained firm. "The evidence says otherwise. He was framed." "Can you prove it?" Adiz opened her mouth. No words came. She couldn't. The captain nodded again. "Take him." As the guards led Obinna away, the villagers began throwing insults. Some even threw handfuls of dirt. The children who once followed him around now hid behind their mothers. Only Adiz ran after him. "Obi!" He turned one last time. Their eyes met. "I believe you," she cried. "I know you didn't do this." A faint smile appeared on his face despite the humiliation. "Thank you." Those were the last words they exchanged before the guards marched him toward the palace. The journey to the palace felt much longer than usual. Word spread quickly. By the time they arrived, dozens of villagers had gathered outside. Everyone wanted to see the stranger who had supposedly stolen the king's sacred staff. Obinna was brought before the throne. The king looked deeply disappointed. "You, the man who entertained this village yesterday. How could you commit such a disgraceful act?" Obinna bowed respectfully despite the chains around his wrists. "Your Majesty, I am innocent. I have no idea how the staff entered my bag." The king frowned. "The guards found it among your belongings." "I know, but someone placed it there." Princess Nkem stood quietly beside the throne. Her face showed perfect concern. "Father, perhaps fear has caused him to invent stories." Obinna looked at her. Their eyes met briefly. For the first time, he noticed something strange. There was no sympathy in her expression, only satisfaction. A terrible realization began forming inside his mind. Could she? No, surely not. The king sighed heavily. "Until the matter is fully investigated, you will remain imprisoned." Obinna closed his eyes briefly. "So be it." The guards led him away. As he disappeared into the palace prison, Princess Nkem smiled ever so slightly. Her revenge had succeeded, or so she believed. The palace prison was cold, damp, and dark. A single barred window allowed thin beams of sunlight to enter. The stone floor was rough beneath his feet. The iron door slammed shut behind him. For the first time since leaving Enugu, Obinna felt completely alone. He sat quietly against the wall. His thoughts raced. He replayed every moment. The wrestling competition, the princess, the conversation in the garden, her rejection, then the royal staff. Couldn't be a coincidence. He whispered to himself, "She did this. But how can I prove it?" Hours passed. No answer came. Back in the village, opinions changed rapidly. The same men who had celebrated Obinna's wrestling victory now pretended they had never trusted him. Emeka sat beneath the mango tree shaking his head. I can't believe he fooled us. Another farmer nodded. He seemed like such a good man. Papa Naji remained silent. His heart was troubled. Nothing about the accusation felt right. Yet, the evidence had been found in Obina's own bag. Chioma folded her arms. I don't know what to believe. She looked toward her older sister. Adiz had barely spoken all afternoon. She sat quietly outside the hut staring down the road leading to the palace. Papa Naji sighed. Daughter, you should let this matter rest. She looked up. I can't. If he stole the staff, then why did he stay here for months without stealing anything else? Nobody answered. She continued. He worked harder than anyone. He shared whatever he had. He respected everyone. Does that sound like a thief? Chioma looked away. No, but the staff was found in his bag. Adiz stood. Exactly. In his bag. Not in his hands. Not hidden by him. Someone wanted us to believe he stole it. Papa Naji frowned thoughtfully. You truly believe he was framed? I know he was. The certainty in her voice surprised both her father and sister. Papa Naji looked at her carefully. You care deeply for him. Adiz lowered her eyes. She didn't deny it. The silence said everything. Chioma smiled gently. So it's true. You love him. Tears filled Adiz's eyes. I don't know when it happened. I only know that my heart refuses to believe he is guilty. Papa Naji walked over and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. My daughter. Sometimes the heart sees what the eyes cannot. Adiz wiped away her tears. I'm taking food to him. Her father hesitated. The villagers will talk. Let them. They already think he's guilty. I won't abandon him too. Without waiting for another response, she entered the kitchen. She carefully packed pounded yam, soup, roasted fish, and a small calabash of water into a basket. Chioma watched quietly. You really are going? Adiz nodded. When everyone else walks away, that is when people need kindness the most. As she lifted the basket onto her head and began walking toward the palace prison, many villagers stared at her in disbelief. Some whispered, she's going to visit the thief. Others shook their heads. She'll only bring shame upon herself. Adiz ignored every word. She continued walking with quiet determination. Far ahead, behind the cold stone walls of the palace prison, Obina sat alone, believing the entire village had turned against him. He had no idea that one person still believed in his innocence, and that her unwavering faith would become the first light in the darkest chapter of his life. The palace prison had no sense of time. Morning and evening looked almost the same inside the cold stone cell. The only clue that another day had passed was the thin beam of sunlight that slipped through the narrow barred window before disappearing again. For Obina, each day seemed longer than the one before. He sat against the rough stone wall, staring silently at the iron bars before him. His beard had begun to grow. His once neat hair had become untidy. His clothes, once clean and pressed, were now stained with dust and dirt. Yet none of that troubled him. What hurt him most was betrayal. Not because strangers believed he was guilty, that he could understand. They had seen the royal staff in his bag. The evidence pointed directly at him. What hurt was wondering whether all the friendships he had built during the past few months had disappeared overnight. He remembered laughing with the farmers, working beside Emeka, sharing meals beneath the mango tree, winning the wrestling competition. How quickly everything had changed. A guard approached his cell carrying a wooden bowl. Food. The bowl was carelessly pushed through the opening beneath the iron gate. Cold yam. A little soup. Nothing more. Obina thanked the guard politely. The man looked surprised. You still have manners. My parents raised me well. The guard shrugged. I've seen thieves who cursed everyone. I'm not a thief. The guard sighed. They all say that. He walked away. Obina slowly placed the untouched food beside him. He had little appetite. Just then another guard appeared. There is a visitor. Obina frowned. A visitor? He couldn't imagine who it could be. The guard unlocked the cell and led him to a small visitors' area separated by thick iron bars. As he rounded the corner, he stopped walking. Adiz stood there holding a basket. The moment she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "You came," Obina whispered. She smiled gently. "I told you I believed you." For several seconds, neither spoke. The silence carried more emotion than words ever could. Finally, Adiz held up the basket. "I brought your favorite." He smiled faintly. "You remembered." "Of course." She carefully unpacked the food. Fresh pounded yam, egusi soup, smoked fish, garden vegetables. The rich aroma filled the small room. "You cooked all this?" She nodded. "I knew the palace food wouldn't be enough." Obina looked down. "You shouldn't have troubled yourself." "It wasn't trouble." She slid the bowl through the small opening beneath the bars. "You need your strength." Obina accepted it. His hands trembled slightly. Not because of hunger, because someone still cared. "You've always taken care of me," he said quietly. "Even when I didn't deserve it." She looked directly into his eyes. "You deserve kindness. And I know you didn't steal anything." Obina felt something tighten inside his chest. "Thank you." Those two simple words carried the weight of everything he couldn't express. When Adiz returned home that evening, she found her father waiting outside beneath the mango tree. Papanaji looked at the empty basket in her hands. "You went." "Yes." "What did he say?" "He thanked me." The old man sighed. "Daughter, the village is talking." "I know. They're saying you are bringing shame upon this family." She lowered the basket. "I don't care." Papanaji looked at her carefully. "Do you truly believe he is innocent?" "I do." "What if you're wrong?" She answered without hesitation. "Then I will accept that. But until someone proves he is guilty beyond that staff found in his bag, I won't abandon him." The old farmer remained silent for a long time. Finally he smiled sadly. "You have your mother's heart." Adiz smiled softly. "I hope that's a good thing." "It is." She always stood by people when everyone else walked away. Chioma stepped outside carrying firewood. "I heard the women at the stream today." "What were they saying?" "They said you're wasting your youth on a criminal." Adiz shrugged. "They're free to think whatever they want." Chioma shook her head. "I don't know how you're this stubborn." Adiz laughed quietly. "I learned from Papa." Papanaji laughed loudly. "Now you're blaming me?" For the first time since Obina's arrest, laughter returned to the compound. Days became weeks. Rain came and went. The crops continued growing. Life in the village slowly returned to normal. Everyone moved on. Everyone except Adiz. Every morning she prepared fresh food. Every afternoon she walked to the palace prison. Every evening she returned home just before sunset. Not once did she miss a day. The guards soon became familiar with her. One afternoon, an elderly prison guard smiled as she approached. "You truly are remarkable." She looked confused. "Why?" "I've worked here for 20 years. I've seen wives abandon husbands. Brothers deny brothers. Friends disappear. But every single day." He shook his head with admiration. "You come." Adiz smiled. "He's alone. He shouldn't have to face this alone." The guard nodded respectfully. "I wish more people thought like you." He opened the gate. "You may go in." Inside the visitor's room, Obina looked healthier than before. Not because prison had become easier, because Adiz gave him something more nourishing than food. "Hope." He smiled as she entered. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." She laughed. "I've never missed a visit." "I know. I still look forward to every one." She sat on a small wooden stool opposite the bars. "So, what happened on the farm today?" She spent the next several minutes describing village life. Chioma had argued with one of the goats again. Emeka accidentally fell into an irrigation ditch. Papanaji had tried teaching young boys how to plant cassava properly. Obina laughed until tears formed in his eyes. "I miss them." "I know. I even miss Emeka's terrible jokes." She smiled. "He misses teasing you." "Really?" He pretends he doesn't. But I can tell. The conversation slowly became more personal. What do you miss most about the city? Adiz asked. Obinna thought carefully. My mother. She nodded. I miss speaking to her. What about your work? He surprised himself with his answer. I don't. She raised an eyebrow. Not at all. He smiled. I miss being useful. But not the endless meetings. She laughed. I never imagined someone could dislike sitting in an office. You've never sat through a 6-hour board meeting. I don't think I want to. They both laughed. Silence followed. Not awkward silence. Comfortable silence. The kind shared between people who enjoyed simply being together. Finally Obinna spoke. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why? She looked puzzled. Why what? Why do you keep coming? The whole village thinks I'm guilty. Even your own family had doubts. You owe me nothing. She lowered her eyes briefly before answering. When I first saw you lying beside the road, you looked lost. Not because you couldn't find your way, because something inside you was broken. She looked back at him. I don't know why, but I wanted to help. Then I got to know you. You worked harder than anyone. You respected my father. You treated everyone kindly. That's not the kind of man who steals. Obinna's eyes became moist. No one had ever understood him so completely. That night, after Adiz left, Obinna lay awake thinking. His feelings frightened him. When he had arrived in the village, his heart had been closed. Sandra's betrayal had convinced him never to trust again. He had promised himself he would never love another woman. Yet, every morning he woke hoping Adiz would visit. Every afternoon he counted the hours until she arrived. Every evening he replayed their conversations. Somewhere between shared meals, laughter, long conversations beneath prison bars, and her unwavering faith, his heart had quietly opened again. He whispered to himself, I'm falling in love. The realization both terrified and comforted him. The following afternoon, Adiz arrived carrying another basket. Today she seemed quieter than usual. Is everything all right? She hesitated. The women at the stream spoke about you again. What did they say? They said I'm foolish. They say I'll never find a husband because everyone believes I love a thief. Obinna lowered his head. I'm sorry. She frowned. For what? For causing you trouble. She smiled gently. You didn't. People always talk. I've learned not to let them decide how I live. Obinna admired her courage. You have a very strong heart. She laughed softly. It doesn't always feel that way. He slowly reached his hand through the bars. Adiz. She looked at him. I've spent weeks trying to understand something. What? Why someone as kind as you would keep believing in me? She didn't answer. He took a deep breath. I finally understand. Her heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? I came to this village believing I would never love again. He smiled sadly. I was wrong. She stared at him in stunned silence. I've fallen in love with you. The words hung in the air. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then tears slowly filled Adiz's eyes. I thought I was the only one. Obinna smiled. You never were. She stepped closer to the iron bars. So, what happens now? He laughed quietly. I suppose that's difficult. She smiled through her tears. Very difficult. He reached both hands through the bars. She gently placed hers in his. I don't care that you're in prison. I don't care what the villagers think. I know the truth. And, she smiled shyly, I love you too. Obinna closed his eyes briefly. For the first time since his arrest, he felt free. They leaned closer. The iron bars remained between them, yet somehow they no longer seemed important. Their foreheads touched lightly through the gap. Then, sharing a brief, tender kiss through the narrow space between the bars, they sealed the promise their hearts had already made. Neither noticed the figure standing quietly in the shadow of the corridor. Princess Nkem. She had come intending to mock Obinna. Instead, she had witnessed the one thing she feared most. He had found love. Real love. the kind she could never force. Her expression darkened. So, she whispered to herself, you truly chose her. Her eyes narrowed as she silently turned away. If I cannot destroy your body, I will destroy your hope. Without another glance, the princess disappeared into the darkness of the palace corridor, already planning her next move, while Obina and Adiz remained unaware that an even greater danger was quietly closing in around them. The morning sun rose gently over the village, but for Adiz it brought no peace. Every day had become the same. She woke before dawn, prepared breakfast for her father and sister, worked in the fields until midday, then hurried to the palace prison with a basket of fresh food for Obina. Although weeks had passed since his arrest, her determination had not weakened. If anything, it had grown stronger. She no longer cared about the whispers that followed her through the village. There goes the girl who loves the thief. What a waste. She could have married any hard-working farmer. The words no longer hurt. She knew the truth in her heart. Obina was innocent. She simply had to prove it. That afternoon, she finished her chores earlier than usual. I'll be back before sunset, she told Papanaji. The old farmer nodded. Be careful. Since Obina's arrest, Papanaji's attitude had slowly changed. He still couldn't explain how the royal staff had ended up inside Obina's bag, but every visit Adiz made to the prison left him more convinced that the young man could not be the criminal everyone believed him to be. Chioma handed her sister a small bundle. I packed extra roasted fish. Adiz smiled. He'll be happy. Chioma looked away awkwardly. I still don't know whether he's innocent. But, she shrugged, if he makes you smile, I hope everything works out. Adiz hugged her sister tightly before beginning the familiar walk toward the palace. When she reached the prison, the elderly guard greeted her with a smile. You've become part of this place. She laughed softly. I hope not. He unlocked the gate. He has been waiting. Obina stood as soon as he saw her. His face brightened immediately. You came. I always will. She unpacked the food while he watched quietly. What is it? She asked. You seem happy. I am. Why? Because every day you come through that gate reminds me that I'm not alone. She smiled warmly. And you'll never be alone. They spent nearly an hour talking. Obina described the books one of the guards had allowed him to borrow. Adiz told him about life in the village. The cassava harvest begins next week. I wish I could help. You will. He looked at her hopefully. You still believe I'll leave this place? I don't believe. I know. He smiled. I wish I had your confidence. She reached through the bars and squeezed his hand. You'll see. When the afternoon shadows began to grow longer, Adiz reluctantly stood. I should go. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be waiting. She smiled one last time before leaving. Neither of them realized that fate had chosen this ordinary day to change everything. Instead of returning directly home, Adiz decided to stop by the palace gardens. The flowers blooming there were famous throughout the kingdom, and she wanted to gather a few medicinal leaves that grew near the stream behind the palace. The area was unusually quiet. Most of the palace servants had gathered in the front courtyard to prepare for visiting chiefs from a neighboring community. As Adiz knelt beside the stream collecting herbs, she suddenly heard laughter. Women's voices. They seemed to be coming from the nearby royal garden. Not wanting to disturb anyone, she quietly stepped behind a flowering bush. Then she froze. Princess Nkem walked into the garden, accompanied by her closest friend, Ifyinanya. Neither woman realized anyone else was nearby. The princess laughed softly. I still can't believe how easy it was. Adiz frowned. Easy? Ifyinanya looked uneasy. You shouldn't laugh about it. No one knows. They will. They won't. Princess Nkem sat gracefully beneath the Udala tree. Father still believes the stranger stole the staff. Adiz's heart skipped. Her breathing became shallow. She remained perfectly still. Ifyinanya lowered her voice. Sometimes I still think we should tell the truth. Princess Nkem laughed. And ruin everything? No. If he rejected me, he deserved what happened. Adiz's eyes widened. Rejected? Iphigenia sighed. I warned you. You should never have hidden the royal staff inside his travel bag. The basket slipped from Adi's trembling hands. A few herbs scattered across the ground. Her entire body went cold. She pressed both hands over her mouth to stop herself from gasping. Princess Nkem continued speaking. If I cannot have him, no woman will. If he spends years inside that prison, he'll eventually forget Adiz. Iphigenia looked uncomfortable. But what if someone discovers the truth? They won't. The only people who know are you and me. Adiz felt tears burning her eyes. Every word confirmed what her heart had believed from the beginning. Obinna had never stolen the royal staff. He had been framed. She waited until the two women left before emerging from behind the bushes. Her legs trembled so badly she could barely stand. It's true, she whispered. He was innocent all along. Without wasting another second, she ran. She ignored the palace guards who called after her, ignored the curious villagers, ignored the burning pain in her legs. She didn't stop until she reached the prison. The elderly guard looked alarmed. What happened? I have to see him. Right now. The urgency in her voice made him unlock the gate immediately. Obinna stood the moment she entered. Adiz? She rushed toward the bars, breathing heavily. I know. He frowned. Know what? I know who framed you. His eyes widened. What? She looked around to ensure nobody else could hear. I overheard Princess Nkem. And her friend. They confessed everything. Obinna stared at her in stunned silence. What exactly did they say? Adiz repeated every word she had heard. She described the conversation carefully. How the princess admitted hiding the royal staff in his travel bag. How she wanted revenge because he had rejected her. How Iphigenia had begged her to confess. When she finished, silence filled the room. Obinna slowly closed his eyes. I knew it. You knew. I suspected. But suspicion isn't proof. He looked at Adiz. Now we have something. We should tell the king. He immediately shook his head. No. Why? Because right now, it's only your word against the princesses. The king loves his daughter. He may believe she is lying to protect me. Adiz lowered her head. You're right. So what do we do? Obinna became thoughtful. His business mind, quiet for so many months, suddenly awakened. He began thinking strategically. There was only one way. He needed someone powerful enough to force the truth into the open. Someone who knew exactly who he really was. Then he remembered. His closest friend. His lawyer. The only person who would never stop looking for him. Emeka. No, not the farmer Emeka, the executive assistant and lifelong friend he had left behind in Enugu. Chuka. If anyone could help, it was Chuka. Obinna looked around the empty room. Do you have paper? The prison guard overheard the question. After weeks of watching Adiz's loyalty and witnessing Obinna's respectful behavior, the elderly guard quietly stepped forward. I have some. A few minutes later, he returned with a sheet of paper and a pen. Obinna thanked him sincerely. Then he began writing. His handwriting remained steady despite everything he had endured. The letter was brief. It revealed his true identity. It explained where he was. It instructed Chuka to come immediately with proof of who he was and legal authorities if necessary. After folding the paper carefully, he handed it to Adiz. This letter must reach Enugu. She looked at it nervously. I've never traveled that far. You won't have to. He thought for a moment. Is there anyone from the village traveling to the city? She smiled suddenly. There is. Tomorrow morning. The produce traders. They take vegetables to Enugu every week. Perfect. He took both her hands through the bars. This letter cannot be lost. I promise. She looked deeply into his eyes. I'll protect it with my life. He smiled. I know you will. That evening, Adiz returned home later than usual. Papa Naji immediately noticed the excitement on her face. What happened? She closed the door before speaking. You must promise not to tell anyone. Her father nodded. I promise. She told him everything, from hiding behind the flowering bushes, to overhearing the princess, to the confession, to the letter. Papa Naji remained speechless. Finally, he whispered, "So, our instincts were right. He truly was innocent." Tears rolled down Adi's cheeks. "I never doubted him." The old farmer embraced his daughter tightly. "I should have trusted my own heart instead of the evidence. I failed him. You can still help him." Papa Naji nodded. "Tomorrow morning, I'll personally make sure that letter reaches Enugu." Adiz smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Papa." Before sunrise the next morning, the village-produced traders prepared their ox carts for the long journey to Enugu. Baskets of vegetables, yams, cassava, and fruits filled the wagons. Papa Naji approached one of the traders, an honest elderly man named Okeke. "My friend, I have an important letter. It must be delivered by hand." The trader accepted it carefully. "You have my word." He tucked the folded letter safely inside his shirt. As the convoy slowly rolled away from the village, Adiz stood beside her father watching until it disappeared beyond the hills. She clasped her hands together silently. "Please, let it reach him." Far away, beyond the winding roads that connected the quiet village to the bustling city of Enugu, destiny was already moving. Within 24 hours, one simple letter would awaken an entire empire. Luxury vehicles would roar toward the forgotten village. Powerful men would demand justice. And the stranger everyone had condemned as a common thief would finally reveal the truth that would leave the entire kingdom speechless. The village woke to what seemed like an ordinary morning. Farmers carried their hoes toward the fields. Women swept the compounds before preparing breakfast. Children chased one another through the dusty paths, laughing without a care in the world. Papa Naji had already left for the cassava farm, while Chioma prepared baskets of vegetables for the market. Only Adiz seemed distracted. Since sending Obina's letter to Enugu 2 days earlier, she had barely slept. Every passing hour brought new questions. Had the letter reached the city? Would anyone believe it? Would anyone come? She stood outside the hut, staring toward the long dirt road that connected the village to the outside world. "You're watching the road again," Chioma teased gently. Adiz smiled faintly. "I can't help it." "You really think someone will come?" "I don't know. But my heart tells me today will be different." Before Chioma could reply, an unusual sound echoed through the valley. It was distant at first, a low rumble, the kind of sound the villagers rarely heard. Everyone stopped what they were doing. The noise grew louder. Children climbed onto rocks to see farther down the road. One of the elders shaded his eyes with his hand. "What is that?" Then someone shouted, "Cars!" Not one, not two, dozens. A long convoy of black luxury SUVs sped toward the village, raising enormous clouds of red dust behind them. The villagers stared in disbelief. No one in the community had ever seen so many expensive vehicles together. As the convoy drew closer, people noticed something even stranger. Several police vehicles accompanied them. Behind them came an ambulance, then another line of luxury vehicles. Children ran after the convoy, laughing with excitement. Women abandoned their cooking pots. Farmers dropped their tools. Within minutes, the entire village had gathered near the entrance. The convoy came to a slow stop in the village square. The engines fell silent. The doors opened almost simultaneously. Men dressed in black suits stepped out first. Each wore an earpiece and dark sunglasses. Their movements were disciplined, professional. Security personnel immediately formed a protective line around the central vehicle. The villagers whispered nervously, "Who are these people? Has a governor come? Maybe a minister?" Even the palace guards hurried to investigate. From the center SUV stepped a tall man in an expensive navy blue suit. His face showed obvious concern. He looked around desperately before approaching the nearest villager. "My name is Chuka Ease. I'm looking for a man named Obi." Papa Naji stepped forward. "I know him." Chuka immediately grabbed the old farmer's hands. "Where is he?" "He has been imprisoned." Chuka's expression darkened. What? He was accused of stealing the royal staff. For several seconds, Chuka simply stared. Then he laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the accusation sounded impossible. Stealing? The man you're talking about owns companies worth billions. He could buy 100 royal staffs if he wanted. The entire village became silent. Papa Naji frowned. What did you say? Chuka looked at the old man. The man you know as Obi is Obinna Okeke, one of the richest businessmen in Enugu state. Gasps spread through the crowd. Impossible. Our Obi. The farmer. The wrestler. Chuka reached into his briefcase and removed several newspapers and business magazines. The front pages displayed photographs of Obinna receiving business awards, opening factories, and standing beside government officials. The villagers gathered around. One by one, they compared the photographs with the memory of the quiet stranger who had lived among them. It was him. There was no doubt. Only now he wore expensive suits instead of simple wrappers. Chioma covered her mouth. He never told us. Papa Naji's eyes filled with tears. He truly was telling the truth. Adiz stood silently. She wasn't surprised. She had always believed there was something unusual about him. Not because of wealth, but because of the dignity with which he carried himself. One of the palace guards hurried toward the palace. The king must hear this immediately. Inside the throne room, the king listened carefully as the captain of the guards explained everything. A convoy from Enugu has arrived. They claim the prisoner is billionaire businessman Obinna Okeke. The king frowned. Bring them. Minutes later, Chuka entered accompanied by several senior police officers, lawyers, and security personnel. Everyone bowed respectfully. My king. The king nodded. You claim the prisoner is someone important. Chuka handed him several identification documents. This is his international passport, corporate identification, business registration records, and recent newspapers. The king examined the documents carefully. His expression changed completely. You mean? The stranger is truly. Chuka answered calmly. He is the chairman of the Okeke Group. He owns companies employing thousands of Nigerians. He disappeared several weeks ago. We've searched everywhere. When his letter finally reached me, he held up the folded letter. I came immediately. The king looked troubled. I had no idea. Chuka's voice remained respectful. My king, whether he is rich or poor, he deserved a proper investigation. The king lowered his head. You are right. He immediately turned toward the captain. Release the prisoner. Now. The heavy prison door slowly opened. Obinna looked up from the small wooden stool where he had been sitting. The elderly prison guard smiled. It seems your wait is over. Before Obinna could ask what he meant, footsteps echoed through the corridor. Then a familiar voice. Obinna! He froze. Chuka! His closest friend rushed forward. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then Chuka embraced him tightly. I've been looking everywhere for you. Obinna smiled. I know. You look terrible. Obinna laughed. I've had better weeks. The chains around his wrists were immediately removed. As he stepped out of the cell, every guard bowed respectfully. I'm sorry for how you were treated, the elderly guard said sincerely. Obinna smiled. You only did your duty. The man looked relieved. Thank you for your kindness. Obinna shook his hand warmly. I'll never forget that you treated me with respect. Outside the palace, the entire village had gathered. Word of Obinna's true identity had spread like wildfire. People whispered among themselves. He's really a billionaire, and we made him work in the fields. He carried cassava with us. He ate from our bowls. When Obinna finally emerged from the palace wearing freshly pressed clothes Chuka had brought for him, silence fell over the crowd. The transformation was astonishing. The simple farmer was gone. Standing before them was a confident businessman. His tailored charcoal suit fit him perfectly. His polished shoes gleamed beneath the sunlight. His posture reflected quiet authority. Yet, his eyes remained the same, kind, calm, humble. Adiz smiled through tears. She didn't see a billionaire. She still saw Obi, the man who had laughed with her beneath the mango tree. The king stood before the assembled villagers. My people, a grave injustice may have been committed. Obinna stepped forward. Your Majesty, before anything else, I ask permission to speak. You may. Obinna looked toward the crowd. I never revealed who I truly was because I wanted people to know me. Not my money. He glanced toward Papa Naji. This family welcomed a stranger. They gave me food, a place to sleep. They never asked for anything. His voice grew softer. They treated me like a son. Papa Naji lowered his head in shame. I doubted you. Obinna smiled gently. I understand why. The evidence was against me. Then his expression became serious. But I did not steal the royal staff. He turned toward the king. I know who placed it inside my bag. Every eye widened. The king frowned. Who? Before Obinna could answer, Adiz stepped forward. I know. The crowd turned toward her. She repeated everything she had overheard in the palace garden. Every word. Every confession. Princess Nkem remained completely still. The king looked at his daughter. Nkem, is this true? She forced a laugh. Father, she's lying. Obinna remained calm. I expected that answer. He looked toward the palace attendants. Where is Ifyananya? The princess suddenly became nervous. Her closest friend was brought before the king. She trembled uncontrollably. The king spoke firmly. Tell me the truth. If you lie before your king, you will answer for it. Ifyananya burst into tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The entire crowd fell silent. It was the princess. She took the royal staff. She hid it inside Obinna's travel bag. I begged her not to. Princess Nkem's face turned pale. You're lying. Ifyananya shook her head desperately. I can't carry this guilt anymore. It's true. The king slowly turned toward his daughter. His voice was filled with disappointment. You. Princess Nkem collapsed onto her knees. Father. I was angry. He rejected me. I only wanted to teach him a lesson. I never thought. Her voice broke. That it would go this far. The villagers gasped. Everything Adiz had said was true. Obinna had been innocent all along. One by one, the people who had insulted him lowered their heads in shame. Emeka stepped forward first. My friend. I'm sorry. I doubted you. Soon others followed. We were wrong. Please forgive us. Papa Naji fell to one knee. My son. I failed you. Obinna quickly lifted the old man to his feet. Please don't. You gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go. I could never forget that kindness. Then Princess Nkem crawled toward him. Tears streamed down her face. I have sinned against you. I destroyed your name. I imprisoned an innocent man. She bowed until her forehead touched the ground. I don't deserve forgiveness. The entire village waited for Obinna's response. Months earlier, he might have demanded revenge. But the village had changed him. The prison had changed him. Adiz had changed him. He looked at the broken princess and spoke quietly. I forgive you. The crowd stared at him in astonishment. Princess Nkem looked up through her tears. You? Forgive me? Yes. Not because what you did was small, but because carrying hatred would only make me another prisoner. The king's eyes filled with emotion. He stepped forward and embraced Obinna. My son, you have shown greater nobility than many kings. The villagers applauded loudly. Justice had finally prevailed. Yet as everyone celebrated Obinna's freedom, only one person mattered to him. He turned slowly toward Adiz. Their eyes met across the crowd. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Everything they had endured together had led to this moment. And before the entire village, Obinna began walking toward the woman whose faith had never wavered, the woman he knew he wanted beside him for the rest of his life. The village square remained silent long after Obinna forgave Princess Nkem. No one had expected that response. Many believed he would demand punishment. Others thought he would use his wealth and influence to humiliate everyone who had doubted him. Instead, he had chosen mercy. The king looked at Obinna with deep admiration. "My son," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Today you have taught this kingdom a lesson that no elder could have taught." He turned toward the gathered villagers. "We judged a man without seeking the whole truth. We allowed evidence to silence wisdom. We failed to remember that justice requires patience." The villagers lowered their heads in shame. Papanaji stepped forward first. Tears streamed freely down the old farmer's face. "My son, I have carried guilt in my heart since the day you were arrested. When you first came to my home, I saw a hungry traveler. I gave you food. I gave you shelter. But when trouble came, I allowed fear to replace trust." He slowly knelt before Obinna. "I ask for your forgiveness." Obinna immediately reached down and gently lifted the old man to his feet. "Please don't kneel before me. You welcomed a complete stranger into your home. You saved my life. If you had left me on that roadside, I would probably have died." He smiled warmly. "You owe me no apology." Papanaji embraced him tightly. "My son." Those two simple words carried more meaning than either of them could express. Around them, many villagers wiped tears from their eyes. Emeka was the next to step forward. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "I've never been good at speeches." The crowd laughed softly. Obinna smiled. "I know." Emeka sighed. "I called you my friend. But when everyone accused you, I doubted you. I even believed you had fooled us." He shook his head. "I was ashamed when I learned the truth." Obinna placed a hand on his shoulder. "You judged what you saw. Most people would have done the same." Emeka grinned. "You're making it difficult for us to feel guilty." The crowd laughed again. "I suppose that's because holding grudges is exhausting," Obinna replied. The atmosphere slowly became lighter. Not everyone found forgiveness easy to accept. Princess Nkem remained on her knees, unable to lift her head. She had expected anger. She had expected revenge. Instead, Obinna's kindness only deepened her shame. The king looked at his daughter with great sadness. "Nkem." She slowly looked up. "You have brought disgrace upon this family. You abused the trust placed in you as a princess." She burst into tears. "I know, father. I was blinded by pride. I thought because I was a princess, I could have anything I wanted." She turned toward Obinna. "But your rejection hurt my pride. I confused wounded pride with love. I have brought suffering to an innocent man." Obinna remained silent. The king continued. "Forgiveness does not erase consequences. You will no longer represent this kingdom at public ceremonies for 1 year. You will spend that time serving widows, orphans, and the elderly. You will learn that leadership begins with humility." Princess Nkem bowed her head. "I accept your judgment." She looked once more at Obinna. "Thank you for showing me mercy when I did not deserve it." Without another word, she quietly left the gathering. Her steps were slow, not because she feared punishment, because she carried the weight of genuine regret. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Chuka walked beside Obinna. "I've been trying to understand something." "What?" "You disappeared without telling anyone. You nearly caused the entire company to collapse." Obinna laughed. "I don't think it was that bad." Chuka raised an eyebrow. "Board members were panicking. Your mother nearly reported you missing internationally." Obinna sighed. "I know. I owe everyone an explanation." Chuka smiled. "Especially your mother." The thought made Obinna laugh. "She'll probably scold me before hugging me." "Without question." They both laughed. Then Chuka became serious. "So, are you coming back to Enugu?" Obinna looked around the village. Children were playing beneath the same mango tree where he had first shared meals with Papanaji's family. Farmers worked peacefully in the fields. Women laughed together at the stream. For the first time in years, he truly felt at home. "I'll return. But not today." Chuka smiled knowingly. I suspected as much. He followed Obina's gaze toward Adiz, who was helping Chioma gather empty baskets. So that's the reason. Obina smiled without denying it. Later that evening, Papanaji invited everyone to share one final meal beneath the mango tree. This time, Chuka and several members of Obina's staff joined them. The contrast amused everyone. Business executives in expensive suits sat on wooden stools, eating pounded yam with their hands while village children watched curiously. One executive whispered to another, "This is actually delicious." Emeka laughed loudly. "You see, our food is better than your city food." The executive smiled. "I believe you." Laughter filled the compound. For the first time, the villagers and the businessmen sat together as equals. No one cared who was rich or poor. Everyone simply enjoyed the evening. As darkness settled over the village, Obina stood. "I have something to say." The conversation stopped. He turned toward Papanaji. "When I arrived here, I thought my life had ended. I had lost trust. I had lost hope. I believed everyone wanted something from me." He looked around the compound. "Then you welcomed me into your home. You asked for nothing. You simply cared." He turned toward Adiz. "And one person believed in me, even when the whole village turned against me." Adiz lowered her eyes shyly. Obina slowly walked toward her. "Adiz." She looked up. "I once promised myself I would never love again. You proved me wrong." He reached into his jacket pocket. Everyone watched curiously. Instead of an expensive diamond ring, he removed a simple woven ring made from dried palm leaves. "I made this while sitting in the prison." The crowd smiled. "I told myself, if I ever walked out of that prison, I would ask the woman who never abandoned me to become my wife." Tears immediately filled Adiz's eyes. He knelt before her. "Adiz Naji, will you marry me?" The entire village held its breath. Adiz could barely speak. Through tears and laughter, she nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes, I will." Cheers erupted instantly. Children jumped with excitement. Women ululated joyfully. Emeka laughed so hard he nearly fell from his stool. Papanaji covered his face as tears rolled freely down his cheeks. Obina gently slipped the handmade ring onto Adiz's finger. "It isn't made of gold." She smiled lovingly. "It means more than gold." He stood and embraced her as the entire village applauded. 3 months later, the village prepared for another celebration. This time, it was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. Luxury vehicles arrived once again. But this visit was different. Instead of police officers, they carried family members, friends, business associates, and respected traditional rulers from across Enugu state. The village was decorated with colorful fabrics, fresh flowers, and hundreds of lanterns. Drummers welcomed the guests. Traditional dancers performed in the village square. The king himself attended the ceremony. When Adiz emerged wearing her beautifully embroidered bridal attire, the entire crowd admired her elegance. She looked radiant, not because of expensive jewelry, but because happiness shone from her face. Obina waited beneath a beautifully decorated canopy, wearing elegant traditional attire. As Adiz walked toward him, she smiled through tears. "You clean up nicely." He laughed. "So do you." The priest completed the ceremony. "You may now kiss your bride." The crowd erupted with applause as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. The celebration continued long into the night, but Obina's greatest surprise came the following morning. He gathered the villagers together once more. "I have a wedding gift." The villagers exchanged curious glances. "A gift?" Obina smiled. "Not for Adiz. For all of you." He signaled toward Chuka. Several large rolled-up drawings were brought forward. Architectural plans. "What are those?" Emeka asked. Obina unrolled the first drawing. A modern primary and secondary school. Gasps spread through the crowd. He unrolled another. A fully equipped health center. Another drawing. A clean water project. Another. A proper road connecting this village to the main highway. The villagers stared in stunned silence. Finally, he revealed the largest drawing. And this is an agricultural processing center. He looked toward Papanaji and the farmers. You have spent your lives working hard. You deserve better prices for your crops. We'll process cassava, maize, vegetables, and palm produce right here. No more middlemen exploiting your labor. The farmers erupted into cheers. Some fell to their knees in gratitude. Others openly wept. Papanaji embraced Obina tightly. My son, you've changed our future. Obina smiled. No, you changed mine first. 6 months later, the village looked almost unrecognizable. Construction crews worked daily. The new road connected the community to nearby towns. The school welcomed children who had never before attended classes. The health center treated patients without forcing them to travel for hours. The agricultural center created jobs for hundreds of villagers. Prosperity slowly replaced poverty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Obina and Adiz stood together beneath the same mango tree where they had first shared quiet conversations. Children laughed nearby. Farmers returned from the fields singing. The air smelled of freshly harvested yams. Adiz leaned gently against her husband. Do you ever regret running out of fuel? Obina laughed softly. If the fuel gauge had worked, I would have driven straight back to Enugu. She smiled. And we never would have met. He looked toward the road where his journey had begun. I thought my car breaking down was the worst day of my life. He intertwined his fingers with hers. But sometimes, the road that seems to lead nowhere is the one that leads you exactly where you belong. Adiz smiled. And where do you belong? Obina looked into her eyes. Here, with you. As the evening breeze swept gently across the fields, they watched the village they now called home. No longer divided by suspicion or fear, but united by forgiveness, hope, and new beginnings. The billionaire who had left Enugu searching for an escape had found something far more valuable than wealth. He had found a family, purpose, and a love that neither betrayal nor hardship could ever take away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.